Welcome to Learning the Violin on video. So the first thing that I would like to explain is that I'm going to divide these lessons into the sections of advancement. Consider that by the time you are done with the lessons in the first part, you are officially a beginner. And by the time you are done, or at least attempting, the lessons in the second part, you are an advanced beginner, beginning intermediate student, and so forth. All of these I'm going to try to put in an ideal order, but you have to bear in mind that everybody is different, and for some people, lesson 2, part 3 might come much more easily than, let's say, lesson 1, part 2. So if you need help with a particular section, don't think that just because you're able to do some things in part 2 that you shouldn't backtrack and review part 1. The very first part of learning to play the violin is learning to hold it, and how you do this cannot be overstated in its importance. Hold the violin the wrong way, everything will be wrong. You will be tense, your fingers will not be able to reach the notes, you will not be able to play quickly or accurately, and essentially your violin playing will barely depart the harbor. For me, holding the violin is a matter of angles. So I'm going to get rid of this for the moment. The angle at which the violin is positioned on the shoulder will affect how comfortably the fingers can hit the strings. Now, holding the violin right in front of you like this puts the fingers exactly where they should be on the strings. Each finger on its own string for the moment, each finger spaced a whole step away from every other finger, but we can't obviously play the violin here. The more that you rotate the violin this way, what I call the yaw of the violin, the more you swing it to the left, the further your arm will have to swing to the left as well. To the point where if you're holding the violin the way I see a lot of beginners hold it, the wrong way, too far on the right side of the violin with the scroll pointing too far to the right, your arm will need to twist inside out in order to be able to play. So the very first lesson is put the violin on your shoulder in such a way that this, the button, misses your neck. From the top down, what you would be able to see is that my arm and the violin right now are making the letter X. A very narrow X, but an X nonetheless. What that will mean is that when I bring my fingers around to the fingerboard, without any strain, I can position the fingers, each one, on its own string, just like I was able to do when I was holding the violin down here. Each finger is falling onto the same corner of the finger as its neighbor, that is to say, the corner further back towards the scroll of the violin. Each finger is relaxed, and most importantly, each finger is positioned over the notes that the violin's creators have placed under your fingers. Again, I can't overstate the importance of this because of how many beginners have come to me straining to reach notes that are actually right there, next to one another. So your very first lesson of holding the violin is being able to hold it without your hands. Positioning the violin across this muscle, the trapezius, and this bone, the collarbone, positioning the violin here at an angle in such a way that resting your head comfortably and passively on top of the violin keeps the violin steady. Your parents, your teacher should not easily be able to pull it away from you. Yeah? If you can do this, your left hand, when we finally start using it, will be free to travel up and down the violin. The mistakes that you want to watch out for. When the scroll dips down, it very often will dip down and to the right. You don't want that. You don't want to be holding the violin so that you're barely clutching onto it. You don't want to be holding the violin with one side of the violin far up and one side far down, because then the bow will not have an easy time playing using the force of gravity. You want the violin fairly horizontal, again, lined up in a letter X with your left arm, and so that you are able to hold it comfortably without the use of your hands. That brings me to one final point about holding the violin, and that is this, the shoulder rest. If I hold the violin without a shoulder rest, it is possible, but for me, specifically, it's not really comfortable. You can see how tense I look right now. Part of that is because the back of the violin is slippery. So there is nothing to stop my shoulder from sliding off the violin off my shoulder, and down it goes. So I don't use the shoulder rest, as most people describe it, to fill this space. This space doesn't really need filling. I can raise my shoulder or lower my head. I can balance the violin without the shoulder rest. What I use it for is traction. I use the shoulder rest to give my shoulder something grippy to rest on. I personally like a Kuhn solo rest. There are also Kuhn brand Voce rests. There are Kuhn brand original rests. The one thing that I would not advise is a cushion or a sponge, because even though they are low, and in that they're very, very good, they don't extend up too much. Even though they do that, they do block some of the vibration of the back plate of the violin, which I like to avoid. I would like to have something that presents something to grip, doesn't extend too far, because I don't want to be doing this, and that is not going to dampen the sound, which is not going to be an issue when you're a complete beginner, but will become an issue as you become more advanced and are more concerned with not just playing, but playing beautifully.